Welcome into the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis.
That's like the quiet storm right there.
The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Welcome to the Pelicans Podcast. I am Joe Cardosi, joined by the joyous Jim Eichenhofer. And man, there's so much to talk about. We had a big media day. I feel like we're both still shaking off everything from that. It was a busy one, Jim, and you were a man about town.
Yeah, it was busy. It was fun. I have this situation every year where media day is always on Monday, and by Wednesday or Thursday of the same week, I'm still trying to go through everything and don't really necessarily have enough time to do that. Yeah. Did a million interviews, got a lot of good stuff. We're going to play some of the clips of some of the maybe best of stuff that I got.
It's hard
on media day.
So much, yeah. I mean, Jim had his own office set up, and there's this long walk down the hallway where they had to go, and then Jim was sitting in a high back chair. But it was a good time. I thought you got some good audio. You know, you just had to freak him out a little bit.
Yes, I'm very intimidating in person. So that's something that, you know, that's one advantage that the veteran players have is that they've dealt with me over a period of years.
Yes.
And it's not quite as daunting to walk into the principal's office.
Yeah, the
on
dark
media
lord
day.
Jim Eichenhofer, you know, but the rookies got to learn. You got to haze them.
Right, exactly. You know? This is a big part of their adjustment to the league. It's something that everyone that plays here has to go through.
Yep.
But I'm going to do the best I can to help them ease their way into their transition as a pro and dealing with myself.
I was about to say, I'm just glad I was able to help with the fog machine and the bats. But it was a great vibe in Jim's office. And I just sort of want to talk about the media day vibe in general. It was a lot of fun this year. It seemed like this Pelicans squad, and I know media day for almost every team. Jimmy Butler is part of this as well. You saw his antics, but it's a fun day. You know, it's a rah-rah day for every team. But it really did feel different, the vibe of this team this year.
By the way, last year when Jimmy Butler did the fake dreads, I was like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
But now that I see that he came out with like he called it, he's in his emo phase.
I love it.
I love the idea of every year he's going to come back with like a different theme, and his media day picture is always going to be something so absurd that we're going to look at all season and
everyone
be like,
on that team was like, we can't use this. Just like, we don't know what to do with this now. It's great. And I just imagine he had to wake up at like 6 a.m. to get ready. At least, to get all that stuff ready.
Right, to get his hair the way it was and to get some of the other additions. I think did he have some like
get some lip rings and
stuff, I
believe,
some rings.
You know,
Yep,
some
that's what I was
lip rings. And so unless he slept in a hyperbolic chamber or something to keep that hair that perfect.
Amazing the dedication that he has.
It was a hell of a day.
To go back to your question, your point as far as the vibes for the Pelicans specifically, I mean, I think it's been this way for the last couple of years just because the group of guys that we have here, no one's been here that long, but we're now at the point where at least, you know, this is the 5th season that Zion's been here. This is the 5th season that Brandon Ingram's been here. There are a few guys now that have gotten to know each other and have kind of gotten ingrained in New Orleans and with the team. And obviously this group of guys gets along so well.
Yeah.
They have among the most roster continuity in the entire NBA, which is something that I will probably get into either later in this show or definitely in the near future.
It matters.
The fact that this is really the second year in a row that they've come back with pretty much the same core guys, and none of the major contributors from last season left in the offseason. So that's very unique. And, you know, we've talked about this in the past, going back, you know, 5, 6, 8, 10 years. There was a stretch where every single offseason there was a bunch of new faces. So the part about how they have almost all of the main guys back from the previous season is definitely unique, and it adds to the vibe of media day because it's not as much of a first day of school like where you're the shy kid's walking in and like has to introduce himself and is afraid he's not going to be able to make friends with, you know, some of the guys because they just all know each other. So that I think that makes people more relaxed.
Oh, for sure. And I think being able to have that carryover of understanding the chemistry from man to man this season, instead of having to just sort of crack open the playbook and refigure it out, you understand your relationships, you understand the skill sets of everybody on your team, and they have great relationships. I think it's just great to see how much fun these guys have together, how much they're genuinely friends. It almost feels like a college vibe, like just a bunch of kids getting together. I mean, Brandon Ingram, when he walked in, he just put on Aaron Summers sunglasses and just did a pose for about 2 minutes, just not moving. So he was having fun, you know, and it just seemed like all the guys that as much fun as they have and as friendly as they've always been, it seems like they are definitely ready this season. It just seems like a different kind of vibe.
And it's funny because we said this last year that the fact that they have so many returning players would be hopefully a big advantage at the beginning of the season especially. And it really was. I mean, the way they started out the season, maybe the first month or so was a little rocky, but after that, in December, they took off. They were near the top of the West for a pretty long stretch. So, obviously it didn't turn out the way that we wanted to at the end of the season with the injuries.
But you saw those glimmers of promise. You saw what it could be.
So, and so when they say this year, we hope that we can start fast because while a bunch of other teams in the NBA made splashy moves and are trying to integrate a couple starters or some star players, the Pelicans definitely have things more set in place in terms of everyone knows what their roles are and everyone knows each other on the court. So, I mean, for really the second year in a row, you hope that this will translate into they get off to a good start and they just need to sustain it this time.
To your point, I mean, the coaching staff as well. Like, there's not a lot that the team is going to have to internally refigure out. And now it's just a matter of, capturing the momentum from last season, bottling it up, figuring out what works. And I don't feel like Willie Green and this group of players is that far away from it.
Right, and I think one of the themes that we heard a lot on Media Day was just the confidence that the players have and the coaches and the front office in what this team is in terms of talent, in terms of potential. A lot of younger players that are going to keep getting better, hopefully, guys that made big strides from their rookie year to their second year.
Yep.
And that was something that I talked about with several players. But in the first clip, we're going to have a bunch of clips today from Media Day of interviews that I did in the quote-unquote principal's office, as we described it earlier. And actually, I should mention, too, I want to thank James Crosby of the video production department because for I don't know how many years in a row now I've been able to use his office. So the players come in and think that all the stuff in there is my office, and they're like, man, this is a pretty cool office. This is
they're
nice.
asking about James's family, and you're just pretending, that's my wife. That's my kid.
Right, those are my kids.
Yep.
Yeah, he actually has a New Orleans Voodoo helmet in there that a lot of guys asked me about, and I had to explain to them because a lot of people love that helmet. I don't know if you remember it's a purple helmet with the pretty cool
Voodoo
logo.
Games.
Yeah, me too. And but I had to explain to them it's a cool helmet, but actually this is in my office. So they had to get the reality
made up
for
a
me.
new elaborate lie every time. I played for him. I was a safety. They called me the entity because I would just scurry through defenders like Aaron Sproles, and
one of the players actually did ask me when I said that this isn't my office and that's someone else's. They said, oh, was it somebody that played for the New Orleans Voodoo? That's why they thought that there was a helmet in there. And I was like, no, it's just, I think James might have worked for them or somehow he has that helmet.
I was about to say, you should have said yes and then pointed at James and see if they believe it. Yeah, he played for him. He was the quarterback. Yeah. That's why they're
offensive
not around
lineman.
anymore. That's why they don't exist.
That's why they folded as a franchise because they had a guy who weighs under 200 pounds.
And this is not a slight towards James. This is if any of us who work for this team were thrown out there as athletes, we would be booed and thrown off the field.
The team would not have lasted long, and unfortunately the Voodoo aren't here anymore because I did enjoy going to those games. But anyways, major digression. Back to what we're talking
about.
That's
what Media Day was like, though, man.
Yeah. This is Zion Williamson and Jonas Valanciunas basically both talking about how much the team showed last season. At the beginning, I asked Zion just how he kind of views the position that the team is in going into the season.
Long story short, we like what we have. Even though we didn't finish the season the way we wanted, when we had all our guys on the court, we were a top 2, top 3 team in the West. And the West is a gauntlet. Mm-hmm. So it is, it's great, amazing, dope, that we do have a lot of guys that are still improving. I feel like I'm improving still myself. B.I. feels the same way, CJ. But the guys like Trey, Herb, Naji, Jose, Kyra, all these dudes, we got a lot of depth. Larry, we have a lot of depth on this team, and we think we can really make a real run at it.
Well, we showed last year that we are really capable, and we are good what we got. So only problem was the injuries, not knowing who's going to play, who's going to be in and out, unfortunate with, long injuries. That got us, thinking like what's going on, why we not good, why we doing changing the game plan because one guy can't go this today, one guy can go tomorrow,
right?
And it was a lot of game plan changing throughout the season, throughout the year. But coming back to the question, we're capable. We know that we have good pieces. We really look good when we play together and we together on the court.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of being ready physically, mentally, putting everything on the line in the game. We're gonna be good.
Great stuff there from Zion and Jonas. Showing that they're still capable, they're still improving. That's what they like to talk about. That's what we like to hear as Pelicans fans, that this isn't the apex, still going upward, man.
I like the fact that there's something concrete and tangible that we can point to as reasons to believe that this team has the ability to be one of the best teams in the West.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about this, I'm sure, all season, but the West is extraordinarily deep this year.
Yes.
And
for a change.
I think for a change, the biggest problem with that, or the biggest challenge with that, is that if you look at every team in the West schedule, it's like you're going to go through it and be like, okay, where's the stretch of even 3-4 games in a row where we're playing against teams that we can just walk on the court and win?
Can we get some
gone.
gimmies? Yeah.
Right. That's a thing of the past. There might be some stretches where just randomly you might play some of the teams at the bottom of the East, but I mean that's going to be few and far between based on the fact that you only play 30 games against the East, you play 52 against the West, your own conference. So I mean that part of it is definitely something that's formidable, but like I said, compared to the recent past where, it was kind of a hope and a dream and then Golden State is at the top and you're like, okay, how are we going to beat Curry and Durant? We probably won't be able to, but at least
I'm buying my lottery ticket,
right.
Though. There's always a chance.
But now, I mean, the fact that there's actual evidence that they can perform at that level, to me, is extremely encouraging. Now,
yes.
People out there are going to say, like, okay, well, half of the season, Jim, like, yeah, great. You don't get a prize for being the best team in the West halfway through the year or 30 games through. And they ended up as a 9th seed and had to go through the play-in tournament.
Yeah.
That was super close, super tight at the end. They easily could have been, 6 or 7 if they had won a couple more games. So what you want to do this year is to not have it come down to the last week of the season the way it did last year.
Yeah, you don't want heartbreakers.
Right.
And it's easy to also think that we were the only team that sort of petered out, maybe lost some momentum. But it's a long season, man. And when you're not focusing on the other teams, you see how it is just sort of a battle of attrition. Players go out. You got to rotate other players in. It's just every season you're faced with some difficulty, but I think this team has been through it. I think they understand what they need to do now. You've got enough heady veterans. You've got enough young players who are hungry, wanting to prove something. Zion. Man, we got some other young players. Trey Murphy and Larry Nance, two of my favorites, two of the more fun to speak to guys. You got to talk to them in the gym office as well.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I hate to even try to narrow it down in terms of there's so many good dudes to talk to on this team. There's so many funny players. I mean, maybe you could make a case that Trey and Larry Nance are the interview MVPs on this squad, but there's
just like might be of the league.
Yeah.
I mean, they're two of the funniest, most interesting dudes in the league. We're just happy to have them on the same team here.
But just like the Western Conference, there's a ton of competition. It's not as easy as like, okay, I'll just do a couple interviews and I'm the best interview on the team. You got to beat out a lot of other players. But, I mentioned how one of the big reasons for optimism this year is the evidence, the concrete, tangible stuff that they put on the court through the first 35 games of the year. The other thing to me in my mind is that you have a bunch of second year, third year, fourth year players. We all know that that's the stage of a lot of players' careers where they make the biggest improvements, the biggest jumps.
Seasoning on them.
A lot of the guys that have won NBA most valuable, or not most valuable, most improved player over the last however many years are players in that third, fourth year of their career. Brandon Ingram won that award his first season here, which I think was his fourth year in the league after he played 3 years for the Lakers. So the point is that you've already shown that you can be one of the best teams in the league when everything comes together and everyone's relatively healthy the way it was last year. But also, to me, I think when Trey Murphy comes back from his injury, there's been a lot of optimism in training camp, media day, about how much he's improved even just this summer.
Which is crazy to think,
it
because
really
he seems
is.
to make some quantum leap every single season.
And what he did last year was amazing in terms of the jump that he went from where he was to where he ended up. Even by March, he's scoring 40 points in a game against Portland.
But you can see it. You can actually see him growing up and filling out like in front of your eyes. I forgot who posted it, but they showed Trey Murphy's first media day.
Really?
And this one. And he looks like a full-grown man compared to the child he was just a few years ago. And you can actually, like, just to see the difference in his face and to see the difference in his build, and his approach is still the same, and now it's just a matter of, like, if he keeps making these leaps every single year, I don't even know what the ceiling on Trey Murphy is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people talked about, Zion mentioned this specifically too, about how much stronger Trey has gotten, as you just referenced.
He looks,
the fact
a little
that
bulkier, yeah.
Right, he definitely focused on that during the offseason. So you talk about Trey Murphy, who was one of the most improved players in the league. You talk about Herb Jones, who I think made a nice jump at the end of last season offensively.
Yes.
Jose Alvarado is now in his third year. Unfortunately, he missed the last couple months of last season, but he's itching to go, and he's pumped to get back on the court. So Dyson Daniels, I mean, there's a long list of players that it doesn't even...
Another guy who bulked up, Dyson Daniels, looking noticeably bigger, stronger.
And it doesn't even have to be all of these guys have to improve. Even if a couple of them, 2 or 3 guys, make a jump out of the, say, 6 youngest players on the team.
Well, you think how small the little incremental pieces away we were from some of those wins. Those little jumps you're talking about could be the difference between a great many wins and losses.
Right. And so that's one of the things that I think I'm the most excited to watch all season, but also training camp and preseason.
Yeah.
And so in these 2 clips by the interview MVPs that I mentioned, Trey Murphy and Larry Nance, they both talk about just how exciting it is that this team, both short-term and long-term, has so much potential based on the young players on the roster. One of the stats and notes that I looked up that I mentioned, I think, to both of these guys before they talked about, some of the things that they like about the Pelicans roster. On NBA.com, they have a search where you can sort, the amount of points per team among first-year players, second-year players, and then they have veterans, which is all players that are not first- and second-year players. Okay. So the Pelicans had the fifth least minutes from veteran players, what NBA.com considers, and they had the 6th fewest points from veteran players. So all of the teams that are in that bottom 5 under the Pelicans in those stats are all rebuilding teams, like Houston, teams that really struggled last year. San Antonio, I think, might have been one of them as well. There's really not that many teams in the league that have the combination of youth, and the Pelicans had a winning record last year. They finished 42-40. Right. Year before they made the playoffs. So basically what Trey and Larry talk about is just that unique position that the Pelicans are in, where they are able to be competitive right now, but they also have some runway for some of these younger players to keep getting better, which we think and hope is going to translate into more wins now, but also a pretty bright future going down the road 2-3 years from now.
It's great. You see young talent, and a lot of times guys don't contribute as much, younger, because, it's a league that's really tough, and then experience is always the best teacher. And so us being able to really contribute at a high level last year in our second years was big for us, and it showed us that we're able to do it, and now the rest of the league is seeing that, all right, these young guys are really hooping. And then also, like, our guys that didn't get to play as much due to injury, it just shows them that, they have a supporting cast and they have guys around them that can really hoop too.
It's great. It's great. Obviously, like you said, there's either situations that are win now or rebuild, or win now or win future, and it's really cool to be a part of a team that can win now, but with a mixture of future optimism. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really the only team I've been a part of that's like that. And I think, obviously, like you said, everyone wants to focus on Dame to Milwaukee and whatever the big other, Beal to Phoenix and the other big deals that happen, but. I think that's not our battle. Our battle is us. We're our own biggest enemy. And, in terms of, staying healthy and and all that. So I think if this offseason was just spent keeping everyone healthy and having a healthy season, that's the biggest acquisition of the summer across the whole league, in my opinion.
The acquisition of health. That would be huge, I guess, for any team, but especially one as snake-bitten as New Orleans has been. Larry Nance, the moment he retires, he's going to get into broadcasting. He's got the voice. He's got the broadcaster voice. It's just perfect. Whether he be a politician or a broadcaster, he's ready to roll, man. Great stuff there.
I got to say, I have always high expectations for what he's going to say, no matter how bad the question that I ask is or anyone else.
Yeah.
But that clip was pretty incredible, the way that he kind of summed up the whole situation for the team.
That's what we've been talking about.
Right.
If they could just stay whole and finish a season, health is huge.
And you're right. We saw a bunch of players in the NBA get big contract extensions this year. Herb got a nice extension. Some of the players are making $40-50 million a year. You can't give health a big contract.
Yeah.
But if we could,
max
pay,
them out. Yeah.
oh my God, the value on that contract would be through the roof.
Whew.
It would make Jaylen Brown and some of the other guys that signed up for big money jealous.
Yep.
They would be like, hey, I want to get the contract that a healthy season
Who's
got.
health's agent? I got to
Right.
get that guy.
Right.
But yeah, man, I mean, that's just one thing to look for. And you can never control it. I think that's the most frustrating thing
Right.
about it is you can always hope, you can cross your fingers, you can cross your toes, and anything else you can physically cross. But there's only so much good it'll do, and you just got to hope and pray that health stays with us. But it seems like everybody has been working on the things they need to work on. Zion's been working on his pliability, his strength. It seems like everybody is focusing on the things they need to do to stay healthy to finish a season.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Trajan Langdon and other people talked about on media that I thought was really interesting, I wrote about this on Monday, that he said that a lot of the players have a chip on their shoulder coming into the season. So, you mentioned that a lot of guys are working on specific things that they think can help them the most and transfer over to the season, and hopefully that'll turn into more wins and a higher placing in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is some intangible that we can't quite measure in terms of how motivated they are to prove, okay, we belong in the conversation as one of the best teams in the West. I mentioned this Monday as well, that, they went from the last few years, I think almost every season since Zion's been here, they've had double-digit national TV appearances. This year they only have 6 games between ESPN, TNT, and ABC. And actually, by the way, slight digression, they did have a game added to the ABC schedule from ESPN, so that's good.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, they're just not a team, and Trajan talked about this specifically, they're not a team that people are talking about right now, which I think to some extent, I don't know if bothers the players is the right way to phrase it.
It's a built-in chip on your shoulder. To be overlooked is almost worse than to be smack-talked.
Mm-hmm.
To just be acted as a non-entity. And New Orleans basketball fans realize this. I think that's why there's such a great connection between New Orleans fans and this team is both, I think, have felt overlooked. When New Orleans fans are wearing that basketball city stuff, like all that, they want people to know that this team is built into the fabric of the city. And I think for the players themselves to not get recognition for being a real contender in the West, for being what if but for health, to just be overlooked has got to be a chip on their shoulder. And any extra motivation rolling into this season, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think when you don't make the playoffs, that's another factor. And I'm not even saying that this is unfair or that they should, that we're not. I'm not sitting here crying about it or complaining about that they're not getting more attention. I think we know the reasons why. When you don't get into the postseason, the conversation.
And we're a small market. We got to be honest with the market we're in. New York, LA teams are going to get most of the coverage.
Right.
Stars are going to get most of the coverage in those big markets. It's just the nature of media coverage. But again, I think it's a little extra twisting of the knife, a little extra twisting of the bolts for motivation.
It's funny, too, when you look at the whole situation in terms of their motivation. You look at the Western Conference of how many teams are going to be really competitive. You look at the fact that there was just a little, I think there was a full-fledged, at least from our perspective, rivalry with the Suns that developed last season, where there's genuine dislike, I think, from the fan base towards them. The Lakers has been a team that we
built in. Has
been there for a while. I think there's a little like rumblings of one with the Timberwolves. Maybe the Grizzlies too, to some extent.
Grizzlies, I would say for sure. Being in the same division, the Zion thing,
Right.
1 and 2, and Memphis is another like gritty, small market city like New Orleans. I almost feel like we're sister cities,
Right.
in terms of NBA markets. And so I respect the Grizzlies, and I love the fandom that those fans have shown towards that team. But also, I really want to beat the Grizzlies.
And you add all that stuff up. You add the motivation that they have, the fact that there's some budding rivalries or some intensity. And that's one of the big reasons why, I mean, beyond the obvious, that I'm looking forward to this regular season, because I feel like on a nightly basis, people say that the season's too long, and I can agree with people that say that. And
when you're in it, it's tough. Yeah.
And I feel like, the NBA has tried to address some of the load management and guys sitting games, which I think is a great push to try to do that, because it sometimes it sends the message that, the regular season is so long that we don't have to have our guys play every night.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's not going to feel that way to me this year, especially for the Pelicans in particular. I think you're going to have night after night where it's like, this is an important game. This is a team that we really want to beat.
Every minute out of these guys together,
right?
And one of those things that Larry talked about, the runway for later and the amount of time that they have. You can't really quantify the ether of a team. What makes it up? That special little blend of guys getting along personally and liking each other genuinely. Plus the chemistry they have on the court, the physical abilities they're able to feed off of with each other. There's only so many metrics you can quantify those things with. But for these guys to be as close genuinely as they are, to be as mentally built alike as they are, it's a lot of guys who are just tryhards, for lack of a better word, who really want to grind it out. There just seems to be something special about the cohesive dynamic of this team.
And I thought that part paid off during the start that they got off to, where they were 18-8. They were 23-14 through 37 games. Unfortunately, that was exactly the mark where Zion had his hamstring injury, missed the last 45 games. So I think we were seeing some of that stuff, the advantage that they might have over certain teams, come into play in terms of the chemistry and how well they get along. But to me, I also have thought about this. Imagine if this team can get to the point where they are a consistent year in and year out. And I guess before I fast forward too much, just this season, if they can be back at the top of the West, what the experience was like in December during that weekend when they played Phoenix was unlike, I think, anything I've seen in terms of the regular season. It felt like the playoffs, even though it was only 20-ish games into the regular season. So I just keep thinking in my head, imagine if this team can get to the point where they're maximizing their potential, combined with how much the city of New Orleans loves these guys. This has been such a good experience in terms of the relationship between New Orleans and the players.
Yeah.
The number of different players that people have I don't know if love affair is the right way to put it, but I mean,
fan crush, whatever.
If you look in the stands and you see all the different jerseys, it's not just Zion and BI and
that's
CJ.
That's what I love about it. It's not just the stars. You see so many Jose jerseys. You see so many second-round undrafted guys with jerseys being worn in the stands that are integral to the fabric of this team.
And it just shows you just how widespread the popularity of the roster is. And in this last clip from Media Day, talked to Naji Marshall and Jose Alvarado.
Two more fan favorites.
Yes, indeed they are. Two great guys to talk to.
Yes.
Dogs. I think they approach interviews maybe from a little bit of different perspective that, say, Trey and Larry do. But they have a lot of enthusiasm and just their personality comes through.
Yeah.
But in these two clips, they both kind of address just the way that the city has adopted the Pelicans as such a team that they love. And one of the things that Naji talks about first is just the number of kind of star players that have been here and guys, NBA players that are very recognizable, but yet this team with this group of guys, I think is, there's no way to really measure this, but it does feel like they're near the top in terms of how popular they are.
Absolutely.
And then after Naji, Jose talks about specifically, I asked him about just seeing his jersey in the stands and his reaction to having so many people pick him out as the player that they love and they support the most on this roster.
Personally, for me, it's kind of like, it's crazy because, like you said, man, Brandon Davis played here, David West, Chris Paul, J.R. Smith, a lot of top guys. But like I just feel like just being around the city, talking to people that's from here, like just getting reviews from them, they tell us how like this the most ever they supported the team, and just like everybody just going around the city, everybody get the same amount of love. Like nobody more popular than nobody. It's just like they all love us, and it's just always great energy. Like it's not too many times where I experience bad energy in New Orleans. So like just to be able to do that off of just straight basketball is crazy to me, to be honest.
Now that you've been here for 3 years and going into your 4th year, I mean, what's it been like as far as the interactions that you have with people? Like, you have people that come up to you when you're around downtown and stuff like that?
I mean, it's just all love, too. Like, I never feel nervous or scared. I just know that if somebody notices me, like, they just want to show all love.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, somebody might try to be Coach Willie Green out there on the streets, but besides the fact of that, everybody just show love.
You mean like giving you tips on what you should do?
What should we do as a team? Telling me to shoot the ball and stuff like that. Like, but besides that, like, for real, it's all love. And there's people giving me advice, telling me like, "Oh, I appreciate it. Like, the city ain't never had a game like this in a minute. Like, y'all back lit. Like, people just showing us love." So
it's just every time I see somebody wear my jersey, I try to go out there and appreciate them, because that jersey just did something for me. Little do they know. I remember the first time I was home, and one of my best friends came to see me, came to the game, and he took a picture because he was sitting in front of the 2 people that had my jersey my rookie year. And this is when I first started to get going. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, wow. He the one who said, wow, like this is insane to me. And then, like you said, I kept growing, and I appreciate that, and I hopefully keep growing. It's just a blessing. Like I said, people that get my jerseys, I try to get grateful for them, because it did me a favor. They changed and making my eyes open more.
I don't know about you, Jimothy, but I'm ready to run through a wall. Anytime I hear Naji and Jose talking, that gets me fired up. First of all, I love the fact that Naji kind of sounds like Method Man. Always gets me pumped up. And then Jose, how can you not love that energy, man? Like, first of all, it's great to see a guy like Jose succeed, a guy that's like my height in the NBA succeeding. Yeah. And then just it sort of speaks to, I don't know if Jose understands how much his energy translates to like New Orleans, because like New Orleans fans have always felt like overlooked, and you know, it feels like a city that doesn't get its just due. And I feel like Jose just speaks to that so much. He doesn't understand why he's our boy. But right. It goes deeper than just wearing a jersey, man. Yeah, I mean, his scrappiness, his intensity, the way we use the phrase chip on our shoulder, I feel like he personifies that maybe the most of anyone on the team. When you see him on the court running up and down, you can just tell he's out for blood every time. And Naji, Naji's not going to take any guff from anybody. Right. So those two dudes, as much as this city loves every player on the team, those two scrappy underdogs, those unheralded guys, are two of the deepest fan favorites, I would say, on this team. And I think the part about Naji that people love, too, is he's the guy that you kind of get a sense that, he's not going to start a fight, but if something else breaks out on the court, maybe he's been waiting for this to happen for a while, and he's ready to show that he's not somebody that can be messed with or toyed with. But what's funny is, like, Naji's not a jerk. He's he's a nice, funny guy. He really is, yeah. But boy, you don't want to see him swinging on you. If you started something on the court, Naji's coming to back up his boys. And just those two guys, just the heart that they show on the court. They have done everything that a non-star can do to get all those minutes, and they've earned every minute by just the toughness they've shown on the court. I hope they understand how much New Orleans fans appreciate the toughness and the grit they show. And both of them were undrafted too, so that's another thing that I think you have to respect both of them for. It's not easy to carve out a career in the NBA, because the guys that get drafted get a million extra chances. To be a second-round pick and stick in the NBA is almost rare. To be undrafted and to be a stalwart on your team, to be like just a cornerstone for the fan base, that's special, man. Yeah, it really is. And I mean, those are two of the guys that we're going to be watching during preseason. Just two good examples too of, even though, like I said, they weren't drafted, the amount of talent and promise potential that this team has gotten from the draft process, even if it isn't during the first 2 rounds, has been something that makes you excited for the next few seasons and beyond.
Just, talking about preseason real briefly, I'm sure we'll get into this in much more detail when we get closer to the games. But, I mean, you have guys like Jordan Hawkins, Dyson Daniels, first-round picks from the last 2 years. Unfortunately, Trey Murphy's going to be out for a little while. Jose and Larry aren't full go in preseason, but I think
season though.
We'll see. Maybe we'll get to see more of some of the other guys. Hawkins and Daniels I mentioned. EJ Liddell, who was a second-round pick a couple of years ago. Kyra Lewis Jr. Maybe he'll get more of an opportunity with Jose not being out there possibly for preseason games.
You could always use his speed. You could always use another slasher.
Right.
Kyra was coming on, so I think we saw some exciting stuff out of some of those guys.
And so, I mean, to kind of go big picture, there have been some preseasons, I think if you went back, say 5 years, 8 years, where preseason, a lot of the guys, if there's players out there that are getting an opportunity, you're like, yeah, they're getting an opportunity, but they really don't have a lot of potential necessarily.
There were some years where I felt like they
them.
were being showcased for other teams almost, more so than seeing how they fit on our team, and that's a totally different philosophy shift.
And I think the level of player that we're talking about in terms of, okay, these guys are going to get more of a chance to play in preseason is just higher. Yeah. You're talking about recent first-round picks. You're talking about guys that were coveted when they came into the NBA.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, maybe like 13th, 14th men who, as you referenced, maybe are either trying to catch on to a roster here or somewhere else in the league. So from that perspective, I think there's going to be a lot to look forward to during preseason training camp. And then obviously open practice is Sunday, so that'll be a good chance for people to get a closer look at the guys in person.
Get in there.
That's something that we'll be talking about more, I'm sure, on Friday's show.
There's so many interesting dynamics to see with this team. There's so much talent now, and now it's a matter of sussing out who fits where, how they're going to operate together. And this is where it gets fun. There may be some bumpy parts and there may be some growing pains, but you cannot argue with the amount of just pure talent that's on this team. I mean, it's so hard not to get excited and start dreaming big. I'm going to try to keep it in check, but just know my eyes have got stars in them. Media Day had me dazzled, Jim. Most of all you. You're just out there with your sequin suit and your Elton John glasses.
Yes.
Just really
diva behavior.
Yeah, you wanted to give the photographers something to take pictures of.
Right.
And,
you could say I was the Jimmy Butler of Pelicans Media Day.
You
maybe.
Always are. You're the Jimmy Butler of my heart. Man, we're going to start rolling soon. I mean, the season is basically upon us as the preseason looms, and the podcast, boy, they're going to start rolling, my friend. We got some in the can ready to roll.
Yes, we have our guy David Jovanovic on Friday.
Big Shot.
Right, better known as Big Shot. I don't even know if when I said his real name, people were like, "Who the heck is that?"
Just now, I was like, "Who's that guy?"
And then when you said Big Shot, people were like, "Oh, okay, we know what you're talking about now." Yeah. But yeah, the equipment manager, he's been with the Pelicans for 35 years, so we took the opportunity to interview him and kind of talk about
a lot of rosters.
Yes, his time in the NBA that goes back to the 80s and just how much things have changed in the league since then. It's happened in a lot of different ways, including the travel. So we look forward to that.
There's not a bunch of like 40-year-olds with mustaches, chain smoking on the sideline and stuff.
Yes, the health has changed.
Yes.
Yeah. The smoking is definitely really slowly filtered. Well, not slowly, rapidly filtered out of the league.
It's so weird to see those old games. There's just a haze in the lights and stuff. Like, how are they playing?
And you realize that some of that was from the players smoking on the bench.
The coaches yelling at them in their faces. Man, it's he's been around since back in the day is the point. Back when there were high socks and different standards. So
he's shorter shorts too.
Much shorter shorts. Yeah, high socks and shorter shorts. That's the look you need to bring back, Jim. I think that's the 2023 season, Jim.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I like that idea, though.
It was worth a shot.
Yeah.
I had to try it.
Yeah.
But man, the Pelicans podcast is back. Tell your friends and pals. Tell them to go subscribe on iTunes. Tell them to check out the Pelicans podcast everywhere they check out podcasts. You're going to want to get on that train. Big thanks to Mr. Jim Eichenhofer doing all the big work. Big thanks to you for listening. I am Joe Cardosi. We will talk to you once again on the Pelicans podcast on Friday. And until then, go hell!
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, presented by SeatGeek. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, presented by SeatGeek.